Hello, BookTube. Well, as you can see, I have yet another guest. This is new BookTuber Joe Spivey. Care to say hello to my imaginary BookTube friends?
Hello, everybody. I usually start with rhythm, but I shall be mundane for now, but there we are.
I don't have any rhythm. But you just began on BookTube. That bespeaks all sorts of questions, all sorts of origin story questions. And yet, I feel compelled to start our inaugural conversation with non-BookTube questions for you.
Fire ahead, Steve. I feel as if I should have my arms behind me and a big cloth over my eyes. I feel like I've been arrested by the corrupt regime, but nevertheless, continue.
We don't know. We don't know what your fate will be. Usually when I befriend someone on BookTube, they stop making videos. But we'll have to hope that doesn't happen in this case. I have two questions that don't have anything to do with BookTube. They don't have anything to do with you, and you don't have any control over them. But nevertheless, first of all, why is your prime minister so tiny? He's the size of a child.
He's cadaverous, isn't he? Very, very thin indeed. I would imagine it's because he's got an excellent diet. But he's the trimmest. He's the trimmest member of the Conservative Party I can remember long since.
Not only trim, but tiny. I mean,
I didn't know he was. I didn't know he was vertically. He's quite small, vertically small. I confess never to have met him, despite my presentiment. But no.
He comes up to roughly the middll sternum of Jacob Rees-Mogg. He's the size of a child. What is going on there? What is going on there?
He's meeting Netanyahu today, isn't he? So is he quite small compared to him? Is that why he brought that up?
Netanyahu is a normal-sized person.
and he towers over him.
Prime Minister is not a normal-sized person.
Yeah.
That was one totally out of your control question that I wanted to ask. And the other totally out of control question I want to ask you is, what is the deal with Sir Keir Starmer? It's like someone went to Hollywood and cast for a spineless politician. We need you to be a spineless politician. He's like
Frankie Boyle, who is a prominent Scottish comedian, I think, said if a pigeon ran up to Keir Starmer, if he ran up to a pigeon, it wouldn't run away or something like that.
No, it wouldn't. No, and if he accidentally stepped on a pigeon, if people were in favor of that, he would say, I've always been in favor of stepping on pigeons. And if anyone, even a little girl in school, was against it, he'd say, I've always hated the idea of stepping on pigeons, when he's never taken a stance on it one way or another. What's his fetish with consistency?
But obviously he's a very straight-laced lawyer. He's a King's Counsel lawyer, so he's very used to just running the tram lines. And he's obviously just the antidote to the idiocy, the bombastic idiocy that was Johnson. That's all it was.
We have spineless politicians here in the U.S.
Very well. Yeah.
But still, none of even Mitt Romney isn't quite the caricature of "I'll say anything you want me to say" politician that Keir Starmer.
I've seen him do extended interviews. Obviously, news outlets very rarely have him on for more than 5 or 6 minutes at a time on a pulpit. But I have seen long-form, maybe 90-minute interviews with him that have been a little more favourable to him, but you do have to invest an awful lot of time just to like the guy. He's not very instantly likable, like myself and you, Steve, on these platforms. We're not instantly likable. But yeah, I don't mind him. I'm not going to announce political standpoints on here, but it may or may not be somebody whom I might be interested in having in government, just for safekeeping.
Certainly looks like, not to continue the political theme, but it certainly looks like your Tories are about to get a drubbing to end all drubbings at the polls.
Yeah, well, they've just lost today. They've lost Tamworth and Mid Bedfordshire in the by-elections that I think were their safe seats since 1937 or something like that. So that's
Tamworth has been their safe seat since 837.
Most of it is just rural landscapes. There are no city whatsoever. It's the prototypical Tory voter, the person with an awful lot of money, with a big house that will just continually vote for them, and they've lost the seat. So there we are.
I wonder why that is. Is that Israel? It's too fast for it to be Israel.
Yeah, it can't be an economic thing. It has to be. Well, it was Nadine Dorries' seat, who obviously was kept out of the House of Lords. Well, the reason there was a by-election was because she didn't perform her parliamentary duties for 6 months. She was taking a wage and was doing manifestly nothing for her constituents. She wasn't turning up to her office. She wasn't doing what it is her job to do for months and months and months. So that's probably it. They just had a bad taste in the mouth. Anti-Tory sentiment is ubiquitous now in this country. So that's my very quick fag packet political analysis, but I've no idea beyond that.
So once your channel gets enormous, are you going to pull a Nadine Dorries? Just not show up for your videos? It'll just be the
That'll
water.
be it. Yeah. I mean, but they'll want me as extras in the Dune series and things like that. So I'll be off gallivanting in Acapulco and things, I'm sure. I won't be doing this for very long.
Series. Oh, you remind me. The director is now saying he wants to do more Dune movies.
Is he?
Yes. I mean, the second movie will come out as soon as it can be fixed. And then, but he has said he wants to move on to Dune Messiah. And maybe
it's his capable hands.
I know for sure. We don't need to rant. We don't need to rant. I don't need to rant about Dune. I know why that is being brooded, and it's not the director. But nothing about that movie has to anything to do with the director at all. It has to do with the star, including this incredible delay. But let's get back to BookTube. I want to know, your channel has just started. You've just started BookTube. I want to know your first impressions, but I first of all would like you to go over again what you touched on in your BookTube newbie tag of why you would do this.
Well, it's strange, really. I've heard you say a couple of times that you will either read something or you will, catch a clip of something, and then you'll be ranting in the kitchen to yourself for a quarter of an hour. And it's either, a family member that gets the gist of that, or it's just, you're just hollowing at the thunder. And a lot of my members of my family said, why don't you just talk about it? Are there avenues through which you could talk about your books and some of these sort of long disquisitions that you tend to give us? Why don't you just upload that to the internet and see what happens? So I've watched BookTube since I first started reading, which I suppose would be another avenue of conversation. But I first started watching perhaps yourself, Mark Nash, some of the slightly bigger ones as well, Katie at Books and Things, and many, many others. I've been watching those for 2 or 3 years, and I can't really say what it was that sort of actually put me on the platform, but I just decided that I saw the BookTube newbie tag, first of all, is an excellent avenue to do it. You don't need much of a jumpstart yourself. You've got 7 or 8 questions there ready and waiting, and that's just it was just a much easier way to get onto YouTube, and you didn't really have to think much for yourself, to be honest.
Well, and plenty of people look for the BookTube newbie tag as well, regularly. I used to do that, but I don't tend to do it anymore because it got a little depressing. It's when you look at the BookTube newbie tag for months on end, or even a year, that you realize the incredible attrition rates. It's probably only 30% of the people who make the BookTube newbie tag who ever go on to make another video. They think it might be a good idea, and then they just stop.
But that's presumably because they want it to explode. That they want 10,000 views on one video, and if they don't get that, then they view themselves as an adamant failure, which is obviously provably untrue. But
that's kind of the attitude that your wretched generation has created, hasn't it?
Precisely, yeah. If you're not, as I say, picked to be the cast of Dune after 3 weeks on YouTube, then you are, as we say, a doomed failure. When in fact, most of us are perfectly average and normal, and we ought to just peter on, being reasonably successful. There's no need to be a superstar, a global intergalactic superstar. But anyway.
Yeah, and if you were a completely average and normal, nothing special at all about you young male actor, well, then you'd stand a really good chance of being cast in Dune.
Steve, not yet. Calm down.
Oh, calm down. It's just, I mean, honestly, the second Dune movie has Austin Butler as Feyd-Rautha. Austin Butler could not be threatening if you covered him in sharp objects and threw him off a balcony into a room full of children. He still wouldn't be threatening.
Yeah.
He is Paul Atreides' mortal enemy. The whole story of Dune comes down to a knife fight between these
exactly two. The last knife fight. Yeah, I just read the book myself about a month ago and loved it. And I knew that isn't he sort of bald and sort of Voldemort-esque and all scaly? Yes. So he's meant to be obviously very different to the way Feyd-Rautha is described.
Yes, and Feyd is a dreamboat in the book.
Yeah,
but in the movie, not only is he shaved completely hairless, it's not just his hair that isn't there, it's his eyebrows that are gone. He's not only is he shaved completely hairless, but just to make sure, because Denis Villeneuve is certain that his viewers are morons, all of Fade Rotha's scenes are shot in black and white.
Right.
And then the movie shifts back to color.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see what I'm trying to go for here? Anyway, all I can think about is all of the young actors in Hollywood who could have had that role, who are good.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I think he was probably cast because of the phenomenal success of Elvis. Oh, wait. Elvis did not succeed.
That might be an indictment, but I haven't seen the film.
You're in for a treat when you do. You will be.
It's all over the Pinterest accounts and Instagram stories of many of my associates. So he's clearly got some traction, as certain industries would label it. He's clearly got some traction with some youngsters. So that'd probably be why.
Well, the Elvis movie is hilarious.
Okay.
It isn't ever intending to be, but it's hilarious. It's the funniest performance Tom Hanks has ever given in any role.
Okay.
And yet he won an Oscar for it. You can tell comedy is the furthest thing from his mind.
Mm.
But anyway, to get back to BookTube, to get back to BookTube. So you're saying that for posterity, you don't remember what the triggering incident was? What caused you to turn on a camera? Surely that moment was memorable.
Well, it ought to be said that I've done 2 years at university, and I have just deferred my third year to give myself a little bit of free time to essentially figure out what I want to find myself and figure out what I want to do with my life. I'm not finding literature study at university the best use of my time, but whilst I was at university, me and my best friend had a joint podcast, much like this, for about 6 months, maybe on and off. Where we discuss. He's a bit of what you would term a dude bro. So he's very interested in all the things that we might disparage, but he's very interested in sport, much like myself. So we had what's called the Gamesmanship podcast, where we would talk about sport and have a bit of a tete-a-tete back and forth for about 45 minutes. So I have got very, very minor unacknowledged experience on camera. So I was confident that I wouldn't just press record and then be some ivory statue that wouldn't be able to express my opinion or anything. I have, a little bit of form doing this, but as I say, I really enjoy talking to a camera. I feel reasonably natural doing it. I don't feel like most of my generation that can't string a sentence together. And the majority of the young booktubers that I watch now, it's as if the videos are like a Fast and Furious movie. They'll have a tiny little thought, then it will change as they edit, and a tiny little thought, then it will change as they edit, and that just goes on ad infinitum for a quarter of an hour. And you think it just seems as if they're clearly a load of people that for whom producing booktube content is not something that gives them pleasure, and they clearly don't want to do it, and they're just like sort of spitting out content. So I wanted to give something unedited that wasn't necessarily like that, and for instance, gave you a little bit more of an insight into the person that was looking into the camera. So,
and is that zippy, choppy presentational style a product of the TikTok that the kids like so much?
Quite possibly, yeah. I'm sure we agree entirely that TikTok ought to be blown off the face of the earth. If any of us were to get to power tomorrow, I would completely ban it, and all short form content on Instagram and on YouTube and all things of that nature.
I was indifferent to it largely until I learned about Book Talk.
Yeah.
And I stopped being indifferent. Very much so. But even if you have form, even if you have been on camera before, there had to be a moment when you thought, all right, well, I mean, this is different than having a podcast with someone.
Mm.
The other people are out there in the ether. So did you look at other BookTube newbie tags? Did you think, well, I'll make this and maybe people will notice?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. I thought, okay, even your first few videos that are viewed by whatever 20 people, it does feel like you're however profound and energetic your thoughts are, it does feel like you're sort of whispering into a dead tramp's ear as opposed to anything else. But I was, again, dead set on, even if I get 2 views for 3 or 4 months on end, it's 30 minutes a day at most. I've got lots of time on my hands at the moment, so I can definitely make some content. I didn't set a huge stall out. I didn't think, if this isn't successful, then I'm just going to get rid of it. And it was just something that is pleasurable whilst you're doing it, and then once you've done it later on in the day, you can think, well, I've spoken for 45 minutes on a book that I really enjoy. That was very helpful, and I now am more clear on what I think about X, Y, and Z book. So it was just pleasurable whilst you're doing it, and then also afterwards as well. It's just, yeah, very beneficial for me.
Now, you haven't made many videos, right?
No, I think about 10. Yeah.
Videos. So have you been doing BookTube long enough for it to affect your book browsing?
Not really, no, because I very rarely shop new books, so I always would go into use bookstores anyway. But I like doing. I like going into stores and buying 5 or 6 books anyway, and obviously BookTube offers me the opportunity in order to do a small mini book haul whenever that happens. But I don't think it's ever going to. I don't think it'll change. What I read, for example, if one particular. Well, a lot of people, for example, have been encouraging me to do the Byron read along that I sort of thought about for some time. So that'll be. I'll hope to do that, but. I don't know. What do you mean? Whether it will affect? Do you think it's going to affect my reading or my book taste, or what are you asking exactly?
Hasn't it affected your reading already? I mean, Victober.
Yeah, but I would pretty much have read
Done that anyway.
What I have done now. I read between, well, depending on size, obviously. I read for about 3 to 4 hours a day, so I can easily get through 3 books a week. It's not as if I wasn't reading at all, and now because I've got a mini audience or whatever. I am reading like a madman. I've always done this. So,
well, it's not quite a mini audience, right? you have more subscribers than some booktubers who've been doing this for a year.
Yeah, I know, and people have been, ridiculously kind, and it's been not very good for my ego because I'm already somebody that thinks quite highly of himself already. So this is not good.
Well, they've been coming for the water bottle. Is that right?
Yes, and they or them, because obviously their gender is as yet unannounced, Steve. They or them are just in the background. Would viewers like to see that, do you think?
Oh, of course. A lot more than they'd like to see you. Look at that. Look at that.
Very tame today. It's very tame today. Very well trained, I'm sure you'll agree.
I saw that in a couple of videos, and I thought, you're running such a risk because booktubers will tell you, you don't choose your props. Your props get chosen for you. People latch onto the weirdest things and want them to come back. I'm fortunate in my case that my prop is alive, so she would be with me anyway.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there is that. Yeah.
But you mentioned you like to go into a bookstore and come out with 4 or 5 books. So could we hear a little about your book shopping environment?
Yes, so
there's no electronic component at either end, that you never shop for books online and that you don't read electronically. Am I right in both of those?
I read mostly articles electronically, so I'll go through the news every morning. As far as I'm aware, I've never held a newspaper in my hand, but I read articles electronically. I have read short books digitally. I've read a few long books digitally, but very rarely. And then my book buying habits, it's bizarre. So obviously I always refer to it as Northern England, but officially the city is Hull. And we have one big Waterstones, which obviously charges approximately £415 per novel. So that's just, unless you have some sort of property empire, you can't go shopping in there. I do very, very occasionally for something very specific, but we have a raft of charity shops. There aren't many specific bookshops, but me and my dad, for example, of a weekend, will go to one of the sort of small hamlets that encircle Hull. So there's Beverley and Cottingham and things like that. And they have 7, 8, 9, 10 charity shops all on one sort of drag strip. And then we'll go into all of those, and I'll pick out 1 or 2 often from each shop, and I will get, for 15 or 16 pounds, I will get 7 or 8 books that would have cost me, as we say, 500 in Waterstones or something like that. So it's purely economical, and there is a certain joy of finding a George Eliot novel next to a colouring book or something like that. So, some excellent piece of classical literature wedged in between felt tip pens and things like that. There is a sort of adventurous zeal to it as well that I quite like.
But your Waterstones is not failing, right? People must use it.
Oh yeah, well yeah, but the commodification, people will always like to buy things, whether they're of worth to their life or not. So that, I mean, most of the stuff that goes in and out of there. I was in the queue the other day, and a woman was pestering one of the assistants for what must have been a board game, because it was costing 60 and 70 pounds. So around Christmas, you get lots of the Sherlock Holmes board games that are £100, so that you can, you know, wherever the hell some of the properties are. You've got, yeah, as I say, colouring, but you've got lots of the thick notebooks that are £20. And I assume they shift a lot of books and a lot of copies. I'm not saying that they don't, but it is a very successful play. But it's not, and it's got plush carpets, it's got a cafe upstairs, it's got all of the what TikTok would call the sort of dark academia aesthetic. It sort of pertains to that, but and it's nice for when you're a new reader. But I very rarely go in there now.
All of those other items, all the cafe, all the so-called non-book items, they're where the money's made.
Mm.
They have just an enormous amount of markup.
Yeah.
That books don't have, because most books have the price printed right on them. That's just only so much you can do with it. You can lower it, but you can't raise it, or the customer will see.
Yeah.
It's the same thing here. The retail bookstores here, it's the same way. It's a weird combination of profusion and a desert. There's everything in the world that you can look at, but you're not going to walk out with anything.
Yeah.
So what is it when, just a nosy question here for book shopping. I love to ask people questions about their specific book shopping. What is it that tips the scales for you? Let's say you're at one of those charity shops and you see a shelf of books. And let's say somebody dropped off a box just the other day, so you haven't seen any of those books before. You haven't been ruminating on any of them. What will do it? What are the factors involved? Do you look for condition?
Not really, no. Usually Black Spine Penguin classics. Obviously, your history with those books is well documented. I really like, can't go wrong with a Penguin classic, provided I think the author's, of reasonable quality.
Wait until you see the next two in the lineup.
Oh, are they not to your liking?
But anyway, go ahead.
So yeah, just usually anything canonical. Just the knowledge that even if it's someone I aren't particularly fond of, but it's somebody whom I ought to have, or feel I ought to read, feel compelled to read. Just the fact that it's £2 in this shop and would be 15 elsewhere. Just that hypothetical bargain that I'm getting means that I would draw to it. But it's usually, perhaps the book that my tablet is currently resting on is Like the Roman, The Life of Enoch Powell by Simon Heffer. It's a huge 1,000-page thing which I use for stability. Anything on a particularly interesting historical or political figure I'll pick up. But yeah, I can't really detail just how it is that I buy a book and don't. It's not a conscious act, really. It's just I don't know. I wouldn't be able to detail it, really.
So this would be the very first time in history that Enoch Powell was a stabilizing influence.
That's very good. Yes, very good.
Okay, that's a little weird. What about the genres? Okay, you've got a big and very good biography, and that is your platform for your tablet. But what about other biographies? Are you tempted? Are there genres that you don't read?
Well, yes. So I don't read much sort of crime fiction, much fantasy, the usual stuff that obviously universities churn out hand over fist book snobs that think that fantasy and crime fiction and all of those are worthless. I don't think they're worthless, but I haven't yet been, for some reason I haven't yet been drawn to them, because I still feel as if there's so much of the canon that I need to get through first. Obviously there's an unimaginable plethora of books there to read, whereas if you just sat in an armchair constantly, you wouldn't be able to get through. So I still feel as if I need to get a proper grounding. So it is usually, as it says in my YouTube, it's classics and then biographies of people that I'm really intrigued by. So Powell, obviously you recommended Oppenheimer for me. There's a few Julius Caesar ones. I'm after the Zamoyski Napoleon biography. I've got Johnson's as well that I could do to get through.
You showed Adam Zamoyski's 1812, but you have the Napoleon biography as well?
No, I'm after it at a reasonable price. Yeah, just for non-fiction November. Yeah, Dad got me Zamoyski's 1812 last week, which I'm sure I'll get through. But yeah, the big biography, because it's not one that it calls Napoleon the rotten git that he probably was. I think so. I don't think it's quite as hagiographical as many of them are. So I'm interested in that one.
No, that was the 1-2 punch that you got for Napoleon biographies. Is that first you got Andrew Roberts writing a book unironically called Napoleon the Great, and then you got Adam Zamoyski coming from the reverse.
Yeah.
Not a great man, that this was a horrible person. But you mentioned Nonfiction November there. So that's a BookTube event.
Oh yeah, yes. You have landed there on the point. So I will read an awful lot more that will obviously pertain to many of the BookTube events. So yes, that is how it will change my reading. So I have read more Victorian literature in October than I otherwise would have done because of Victober and making videos, and also it'd be the same for November and any of the other events that happen to be in existence.
Hence your terrific recent video about Tennyson.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so Nonfiction November is out there. It's now
Yeah.
in your mind, whereas a year ago it wouldn't have been.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah.
It's just a BookTube thing that's in your mind. But in addition to BookTube things, what about BookTube people?
Yes.
Has your viewing expanded? Keeping in mind here the self-evident fact that they're all losers except for me.
Of course, yes, yeah. That much is definite, but I don't know. Yeah, so a lot of the people, obviously, there are thousands of channels, and so I only listened to a small minority beforehand. But now, for example, Renee from the Left-Handed Reader, she's always commenting on and I hadn't seen her channel before. She's got about 800-900 subscribers. Her videos are excellent. Where again, she pretty much just sits down with a microphone and talks for half an hour, 40 minutes. I prefer that kind of content. Who else? Who has commented? Michael K. Vaughan and who did you do? What's his name? Oh, Randy Ray. You did a video with him last Sunday. I hadn't previously heard of him, and then I went onto his channel and saw his Sherlock Holmes video, which was essentially a mirroring of my favourites of Sherlock Holmes. He talked about the Blue Carbuncle, Study in Scarlet, and the Speckled Band, which are essentially my three favourites as well. So I was cackling with laughter whenever I read that. So he's somebody I'm watching quite a lot now as well. So yeah, it has. Just if somebody comments on your YouTube channel, I think it's certainly a little bit of a duty for you to then go over to their channel and see what they're up to as well.
What about the mechanics of YouTube? If I could ask, do you film on a phone?
It's an iPad.
You film on an iPad.
Yeah.
And do you have in your mind a kind of schedule? Or is
no, I have obviously some pre-rehearsed rhymes to start the video with, which I don't know whether they're very tasteful. And then I do write down thoughts, maybe 4 or 5 bullet points that I definitely want to talk about, but I never have anything beyond those points. I certainly aren't, I don't have like 17 or 18 scripts around me or anything. So I do have points that I want to discuss, but never anything more than 4 or 5 bullet points, as I say.
What about the making of the videos? I mean, when you wake up in the morning, do you think, I feel like today is a day for a video?
I do that. I feel that every day. I have a very, very regular cycle. Unlike most of my generation, I don't go out getting blind drunk 3 nights a week, having 15 pints of alcohol or whatever. So I wake up usually quite early, between 6 and 7. That's where I usually read for about half an hour to an hour there most of the time. And so my thoughts are pretty regular. I always feel as if I can sit down for 45 minutes and talk about X, Y, or Z subject. I'm not somebody that has ever found it difficult, or, as we say, most of the sort of sullen, glowering people that for which YouTube seems to be a chore, that will never ever be the case for me, because it's an utter joy.
But so you get up every morning at 6 and you're not one for spending a huge amount of money every week at the pubs? Are you sure you're not, dude, bro?
Are
you in fact, dude, bro?
Well, I've got a question for you here, Steve. So obviously you've got your huge Western Canon starter kit. You've got all of your videos on the Daily Penguin. You've got probably what amounts to hundreds of hours of live streams. Could you possibly guess which video it was that first drew me to your YouTube channel? You've got all of that, but it's not any of those. It's the most bizarre, weird avenue into the world of Steve Donoghue.
My only guess would be a video on my channel that is, for some reason, weirdly popular. I did a
Yes,
joke video about removing mold from a book.
it's not. No, it's not that.
Okay.
It was indeed. I think it's titled "A Chat About Jordan Peterson."
Oh, yes,
So
yes.
it shames me to say, but I was a very obviously I've long since disavowed that, but I was a very early acolyte of him. I was the typically aimless 17 or 18-year-old that didn't really acknowledge that women were actually sort of actual human beings that are capable of actions and thoughts of their own. And so was drawn into that. And then I saw, who's this sort of this guy with loads of books around him talking about Jordan Peterson? He'll definitely have something positive to say. And then you tore him to bits for 40 minutes.
No. And in that video, I at one point make a parenthetical mention of the fact that if some of the mental factors that I don't know the guy, so if I'm extrapolating on some mental factors, and in that video I said if some of these mental factors are true, then he should watch out that he doesn't lose his mind. And then he did.
Yeah.
So,
he is doing, yeah. Yeah, he always talks about, I mean obviously it's always very pugilistic, but I watch from Twitter, I follow his Twitter now, but purely as if somebody going to a zoo who's watching something in a pen, because it's the worst display of sort of, he is supposed to be against all of this arrogant petulance that he sees on whatever university campuses, and he's probably the most arrogant and petulant person on the internet. Some of the things that he will reply to is just absolutely abhorrent, and so I still watch lots of his videos just out of sheer interest now.
His Twitter feed, the damage he's doing to his public reputation could be fixed very easily. You only have to watch his Twitter feed for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
Realize what the main problem is, which is that he is on Twitter nonstop, literally 12 hours a day. Well, just stop that. just change that, and everything else will fall in line. But he seems mild to me now. I'm helping a friend to do an online research project about all of his spawn.
Okay.
All of the dude bro channels that have sprung up because they think they have an intellectual patron now, and those channels are so much worse than anything you could imagine. Oh my god, my friend picked me because I have a lot more time than he does, so and a lot of it just boils down to that. I have a lot more time than he does, and he trusts me to take notes where I won't miss anything. So I can quadruple the reach of his viewing research, but oh my god, at what price? Talk about not viewing women as human, and that is just the absolute basic.
And whenever they do have, so Chris Williamson has had, I think, 3 or 4 women on. Whenever he does have them on, they are 14 out of 10 what he would describe as sort of super Barbie doll aesthetically attractive people. He never had Mary Beard on, or somebody who happens just to be an intelligent woman that you can have a conversation with. They have to be 14 out of 10 gorgeous girls that he's presumably then going to go to bed with afterwards.
And I think out of 1,000 guests, I think you're right. He's had 4 women on his show, and not only are they all gorgeous, but they all are sexist. They all hate women. Yeah. They're not. He's not going to them for the other side, for the viewpoint. He gets them on, with 10 different layers of lip gloss. They look at the camera and say, "We should be barefoot in the kitchen." Okay, thanks. That doesn't exactly make your channel even. Now, he would be astonished that Mary Beard even exists.
I know.
And the sad thing is, the sad inequality of the internet is that famously Mary Beard would not at all be surprised that he exists. Because you're a woman online.
I know, it's ridiculous, yeah.
Crap in your direction immediately.
But I think his content is certainly skewed because the reason he's got some sort of public appeal is because he was on Love Island, which is obviously the immensely wasteful reality TV show that goes on. It's Britain, it's scourged across to Australia. There might even be an American version now. And so you have to expect that somebody that's been within the confines of, essentially, it's difficult to say, but ditzy girls who are there purely for their aesthetic appeal. They've got very, very little about them. And so, of course, he's going to have a marred view of the opposite sex. It's inevitable. And so that explains Chris Williamson. But what explains Lex Friedman or Rogan or the bloke with the I mean, they've all got beards. The big bloke with the big beard. There's loads of blokes with big beards. What quite explains all that, I'm not sure, but
I forget his name. There's a gigantic, I think he's Scottish guy with a gigantic beard, constantly vaping. He's constantly vaping throughout every episode. So even when the camera's not on him, you can hear this obscene gurgling sound.
Yeah.
It's this superheated water that just, that sound is synonymous with him. He barely stops to speak. It's all the same. Mary Beard does not exist in their world. Marilyn Robinson does not exist in their world. George Eliot.
Anything like that, anything approaching somebody that isn't there purely for what they look like, purely for the contents of their hearts and minds, rather than what they display. But anyway,
you go back years to Jordan Peterson before he started wearing the weird checkerboard suits and
when he was caricatured as Red Skull or whatever it was.
Yes. Before that, when he was a relatively normal person looking for fame, you could look at the original case with him and say, well, the point that he's making is that your decision of what you want to call yourself is a delusion, and I should not be legally compelled to join you in your delusion any more than I would if someone said they were Napoleon Bonaparte. I would not call you Your Excellency.
Because he was on television before the Bill C-16 stuff, wasn't he? He was, obviously he's a clinical psychologist, so he was interviewed about certain tidbits beforehand, but it was obviously the Bill C-16, which he rightly opposed. But after that, he just gathered a storm, because all he was essentially feeding people meat that were already prejudiced against certain sections of society. And it doesn't take long unless you sound half cogent and confident and have a PhD. Those are all the prerequisites to be successful in that avenue. And it takes people like me. I'm not even then I wasn't 17 or 18. I wasn't a ridiculously stupid human being. I'd read all sorts, but for some reason there is a glow and an attraction to him, which is, I don't know. It's just it's very bizarre.
Yeah. How did we get on Jordan Peterson?
I thought about bringing it up, and I knew that would be a rabbit hole that we'd spend a quarter of an hour.
We're running out of time here.
I know.
We'll have to do a part 2.
Of course.
But in the meantime, the channel is your name, Joe Spivey. You should all go over and see what you're missing. The water bottle will be there.